Right, so we'll start exactly where we ended in the last video. I literally just got down to the unit. This is indeed day 2, and I'm straight back on the Sedan's boost pipes. So today, what we got to do? I've got a 10mm section to take out of the lower boost pipe and then tack that up. These pipes are going to remain tacked at the moment until I actually finalise their position. But then we're going to be working straight onto the top boost pipe. We'll get that all tacked up and everything, and then I need to work on finishing the induction off. So, I mean, this is a fucking eBay special cone filter. It's what was on the Sedan at the moment. Really, I want to upgrade that filter to something slightly nicer like a ram air. But for now, and for the principles of mocking, it will give me my distances, my thereabouts to be able to tack the pipework up into place. So the engine bay is exactly where I left it last night. So the pipe what I've got to remove is just this one. I've got to cut about a 10mm section out of this pipe here. That should hopefully bring this over and centralise it actually in what I'm going to call the tunnel. So this boost pipe, which is already tacked up, there is more than enough on there to just pull it out of the silicone slightly more. So that'll be ideal. And I have noticed that my radiator has took a love wee, so every time I have to remove this top engine mount and lean the engine forward, it's been touching the radiator. And yeah, she's took a love wee. I might have snapped that fitting off, but yeah, let's crack on. So that's that lower section of boost pipe removed from the estate. It doesn't fit in the bandsaw, so I'm going to have to use the angle grinder to hand cut it. Now you can see I've witness marked at this side and this side, marked engine and the intercooler up. So that bit of pipe I've just roughly cut with the angle grinder. I've then used the TIG welder and I've just very roughly tacked a bit of pipe, bit straight on the end, so I can hold that in the vise and get it back in the bandsaw. So that is that pipe pretty much tacked up and complete. So it comes straight over the top of the gearbox. We can see we've now got a nice little bit of space round everywhere. And get fingers in there. And then she comes into the bottom of the intercooler. So all in all, I dare say that is a pretty clean bottom pipe. But the only thing I want to do is this one I'm going to leave as a floating pipe. This back one, I want to put a nice bracket. I don't know if we can see, there's a nut just there. I want to put a nice bracket across just to hold some of the weight of that. Because at the moment, cock and a sock effect, it moves around quite a bit. But you can hear the bandsaw going in the background. I'm now cutting up the next pipe, which I'm hoping to go for a nice 45 straight off that, dive roughly in between here, keep it nice and tight, because I've got to keep this profile here as low as possible. So remember, with this, as you can see, I used to hit the bonnet, so I've got to keep that profile as low as possible, come through here behind the cable and then shoot straight across. Let's ignore the rust. That's that top pipe now off the bandsaw. So as for clearance, you can see we're just missing the injector pipe, we're just touching the throttle cable. That's not going to be too much of a biggie. I imagine later on I'll possibly shorten the throttle cable down, pull this through a little bit more just to get around that rubbing. This is buttered up into here as much as possible. I want that to be the tightest fit I can achieve. So that will leave me, I'll possibly just make a bracket off here, off the pump, and then come across onto the top. But so I've tried to recycle the lower pipe, which was the original one I built for the estate, and as you can see, my measurements were off the last time. So yet again, it's going to be a case of cut this, I'll drop a sleeve in there to correct that, and then by the looks of it, I'm going to want another sleeve in there just to correct all this up. Now, I had debated whether or not to leave this a separate pipe to this bottom section for ease of fitting, but realistically the only complication of fitting that bit of pipe is just going to be removing the throttle cable each time, so I think I can live with that. So yet again, we've had another significant hop, skip and jump into the future. So I've welded that sleeve in now. Well, I say welded, it's tacked. As you can see, the witness line on the back there, that was the easiest way just to keep the angle coming through. I've also cut another sleeve ready to go in between here and here, and lo and behold, the fitment, I say it's perfect, I now can't do it on the camera, of course. There we go. Well, you get the picture. The fitment is perfect when it's tacked. I've now got to decide whether or not I actually tack that, or whether I do use that as another sleeve joiner. As a mild complication, I completely forgot in the last clip, was my top radiator hose, so it makes fishing that pipe in a little bit of a pain in the ass. More scared about hitting the radiator when I do it. Of course, I could undo the top radiator pipe each time I want to take the boost pipe off, but you can imagine how much of a pig gas going to be. Realistically though, how often am I going to be removing these boost pipes? So, having a think about it, I mean, we all know it's going to look pretty being one solid hard pipe. So, I've got to go for a wee in a second, and then no doubt we'll skip back into the future again, and this will all be tacked up and pretty much ready to go. And there we go, that's that top pipe now tacked in. So, pretty happy with the fitment on that, because if we get down to the side, you can see it's only just slightly higher than like the fuel filter. So, I've definitely got clearance on that bonnet. I'm pleased with that. Yeah, I need to throw some more harder tacks in there, do the same on that bottom pipe, and then I suppose I've got to start looking at this induction pipe and how I'm going to bring that over. Don't even know if I've got any pipe work to try and mock it with, so kind of in mind. So obviously the 2.5 inch comes round and it will come down here. So I'm hoping to maybe get the 2.5 inch down there and then settle up with the air filter sat in here somewhere. It's exactly how it's sat on the sedan at the moment. So I've got a 3-inch cone on the sedan, so I've got to decide when to execute that into a 2.5 to 3-inch reducer. I call it a reducer, I should be saying it the other way round. Where are we? There we go. So yeah, that should polish up nicely, but it's whether or not I literally stick it on the very end piece for the air filter, or I expand it over here. I feel like if I expand it over here, it might end up looking a bit daft. Not that you can tell that we've gone from 2 inch to 2.25 there, but that just sort of flows nicely anyway. That's that induction pipe now tucked back in again, so I suppose nobody's really seen it in a car yet. So that's the sort of clearance you get on the cam pulley. Yeah, I mean, if the cam belt wanders over that way, might spell trouble. Didn't really think about that, but nearly every one of these engines I own, the cam belt always wanders that way. So my worst case scenario is I can notch that pipe slightly, but I don't think it's going to come to it. There's clearance there. Obviously clearance down all the inner leg and the master cylinder. The master cylinder is always the big one to try and get an induction pipe through. So yeah, you can see why I put so much time and effort into that, because that is true 2.5 inch induction, which is one thing these engines always lack, is a proper induction. But right, let's get back to it. So what I'm thinking, where is it? 2.5 inch pipe, 90 degree, drop that in there somewhere, Now we're going to have to be careful because that's going to have to be cut perfectly so it doesn't touch here. I might have to just live with the fact it's potentially going to touch the battery box cover. That's the word I was looking for. So I might have to live with the fact it's going to touch that. The worst case scenario is we can trim a piece out of it, or I can just get rid of it. To be honest, it does nothing anyway. So that's going to be the next thing, is I'll mark up to put that 90 in there, cut it on the bandsaw. Bob's your uncle. You know how the rest of that goes. Let's crack on again. That's the next section now, cutting. Same principle as before, we just tacked it up with the TIG welder, just so I could get the bend actually in the bandsaw. But right, so back over to the car. So I've now chopped my induction pipe down. I was gonna weld that 90 straight in there, but for the sakes of ease of taking this pipe off and stuff like that in the future, I figured it's probably better to put a silicone there, and I've just about got enough gap to do it. So that's going to be the silicone joiner there. 90's going to come round. That's going to mean I can actually float that to suit that gap on that silicone just over there, which is great. And then I can just make one piece for the induction pipe to come through. Hopefully that should make life a lot easier. Right, so it's 6 o'clock in the evening now and I've lost all motivation, so let's just have a quick rundown. I've managed to mock the rest of the induction pipe up. It's crudely taped at the moment, but that'll be tomorrow's job to tack weld that all up and make sure she's actually in place. So what we're going for, so it's coming straight from the mouth of the turbo. It's coming 2.5 inch all the way along. Got a single joiner there, which should make this all easier to go in. And then we come down, and that's a 2.5 into a 3-inch step up, and then 3-inch straight into the cone filter. I thought in the end this transition here actually looked better than maybe putting the transition to the mouth of that. Just makes the pipe work, fills the bay up a little bit more. Yeah, hopefully I don't regret my decisions later, but that section is a lot easier to remake than everything else. Of course, everything else is all now tacked up, so minus we've got no inlet manifold at the moment to show the rest of the mocking, but that's because I've been having to take this induction pipe in and out. In a nutshell though, that is it for this evening. So this will go out as another episode, and then it will be day 3 back on it again. So what we achieved today: bottom boost pipe tacked up, finished. Top boost pipe tacked up and finished. And of course we've got the induction, I'll call it mocked up. So yeah, it's all sort of, it's taped, ready to tack. But yeah, I'll be back on this again tomorrow. That'll be another episode as per normal. Cheers for watching, guys, and I will catch you later.